The beauty and the diversity of art. There has long been a constant negative association between street art and vandalism, which has hindered street artists from creating beautiful pieces for the public to enjoy. It is in an artist's DNA to create and inspire others. For example, artists such as Andy Warhol, Mark Rothko, Pablo Picasso, and Vincent van Gogh have all created art that has inspired, motivated, and provoked critical thought among society. Just like these known artists, street artists want to do the same. They want to inspire and create. It can be hard, though, to create and inspire others with artwork when you're an artist and your artwork is at constant odds with laws and negative perceptions. Street art may have started with the negative intentions from gangs wanting to tag their names or deface property by writing harmful remarks or slurs on buildings in 1920 and 1930. But since then, street art has become a remarkable and colorful contribution to society. Street artists have the potential to do the same for society that Warhol, Rothko, Picasso, and Van Gogh did. But describing what street art is, the different viewpoints towards street art, and how the creation of more street art programs could help break the association between street art and vandalism, I hope to persuade those who view street art as vandalism to look at it in a new light and consider it a form of art and not as a form of crime. Often when one thinks of art, they immediately think of detailed pieces hanging in a museum such as the John and Maple Ringling Museum of Art or the Art Institute of Chicago. But art is subjective and cannot be boxed into one big idea of what art should and should not be. Unfortunately, this has happened with street art because it is often put in the category of crime, an example, vandalism, trespassing, or defacement of property. So many people have learned to view it as horrible and not as true art. But what if people actually took the time to understand street art and the amount of time, effort, and creativity that goes hand in hand with it? So let me tell you what street art is. Street art is a form of artwork that is often considered unofficial, and independent. It is created in a public location for public visibility and can be displayed on buildings, streets, trains, and on other publicly viewed surfaces. Street art began in the 1920s and 1930s. It began as a negative form of graffiti, a way for gangs to tag or scratch their names on walls and train cars for public viewing. However, in the 1970s and 1980s is when the subversive culture of street art truly began to make an impact. Youth in the 1970s and 1980s used street art as a way to respond to the socio-political environment around them by taking the battle for meaning into their own hands. Soon after, the youth took to using street art as a form of communicating their rights. Street art started gaining more respect, not just from youth, but from adults as well. Since the 1970s and 1980s, street art has grown into an immense way of expression for youth and adults, and many different categories of street art have formed. A few of them are graffiti, which are writings or drawings free-handedly scribbled, scratched, or sprayed on a wall or other surface in a public place. Stencil graffiti is the use of stencils made out of paper, cardboard, or other media to create an image or text that is easily reproducible. Sculptures, which is the art of making 2- or 3-dimensional representative or abstract forms, especially by carving stone or wood or by casting metal or plaster. Yarn bombing, which is the action or activity of covering objects or structures in public places with decorative knitted or crocheted material. Lastly, street installation, which is an artistic genre of 3-dimensional works that are often site-specific and designed to transform the perception of a space. Art is often defined as the expression or application of human creative skills and imagination. Street artists have to apply tremendous amounts of creativity, imagination, effort, time, and colors for their artwork to be able to catch people's attention. With so much work and effort put into each piece, why is street art still being considered vandalism? Which brings me to my next point. Is street art an art or a crime? Street art began in the 1920s and 1930s as a way for gangs to deface property. Unfortunately today, gangs such as Crips, Bloods, MS-13, and Latin Kings still use graffiti as a way to deface property. Because of this, street art graffiti has been given a bad name. But gang graffiti and tagging are not at all like graffiti in the street. But gang graffiti and tagging are not at all like graffiti in street art. In the words of Mint Cerf, if it takes more than 5 minutes, it's not graffiti. When gang members use graffiti, their intentions are to harm and deface property, whereas street artists just want to create, as well as inspire their viewers with beautiful pieces of artwork. Can you imagine how hard it is for a true street artist with good intentions to express themselves when their art is constantly being associated with crime caused by gangs? It is so important to remember that graffiti done by gangs causes harm and should be considered vandalism, especially if it contains harmful slurs or sayings, gang signs, or tagging. But not all art done on the street should be associated with crime. Yes, there are gangs and individuals out there that just do not care about defacing property, but there are so many more artists, true street artists, who do take the proper channels and truly just want to create images and art that either sends a powerful and inspiring message or that just brightens up a certain urban area. So why is it fair for these artists to be punished for the idiocracy of gangs or people who just literally do not care about the true meaning of street art? Instead of diminishing street art and associating it with crime or with gang graffiti and tagging, people should encourage these street artists who actually care to continue their works to show people that not all street art is vandalism. By encouraging instead of diminishing, you can be a part of the change. Also, to change the negative association between street art and crime, such as vandalism and defacement of property, I believe that if more cities and more urban areas created programs or donated buildings where youth and individuals who love street art can go to learn about street art or have areas where they can express themselves, then the outlook towards street art being criminal would change. Often or not, when street art is brought up in conversation, an individual's head fills with images of vandalized bus stops, gang signs tagged in alleyways, and use with spray cans on the side of the train tracks. However, that is not the case. Street art is so much more. It is historic, diverse, mysterious, and incorporates so much creativity. Street art even provides freedom to express and create and to ask and raise questions. Street art also forms community. To be a street artist, you do not need to look a certain way or be anything but yourself. The street art world is made up of artists and art lovers from all over the world, all walks of life, and of all ages. So if street art is all of these things, shouldn't cities and urban areas organize programs or have programs for street art, a place where youth and individuals who love street art can go to learn and create and have a place where they can be themselves? There are some programs for street art already in place. There is one in Denver, Colorado called Art Street, and there is another one in Chicago, Illinois called the Chicago Public Art Program. These are only 2 major cities in the whole United States, though. I believe that youth in other major cities would love to have a street art program as well. If more cities created street art programs for youth and individuals who love street art, I truly believe a change would come from it. These programs could teach youth and interested individuals the history, the diversity, the mystery, the creativity, and the freedom and community that creating street art offers. It could even be a safe haven for youth with a similar background to mine. I grew up in foster care in an urban area, mostly in urban areas, and art especially street art, was a huge part of my life. I know that if I had a program that included or taught me everything I stated before, I probably could have stayed out of a lot of trouble and could have had a place where I could go where I was not judged or asked to be anything or anyone but me. Also, why couldn't cities donate more abandoned buildings to street artists, programs, or to already developed street artists that need places to put their art? In 2018, the U.S. Census registered that 17,019,726 buildings and homes were vacant in the United States. 17,019,726. That's crazy. So in all reality, there is room for programs such as street art programs to be donated a building and formed. So why is this not being done? Why does street art continue to be associated with crime? And when there are so many different ways to change that, these programs, or at least the formation and start of them, could also be the change that our society needs to start viewing and believing in street art as a true art form instead of a criminal act. Why not make a place where individuals can learn about a growing art form that creates and inspires people who see it, especially if there is room for it? Especially if there is room for these types of programs to be formed. It is in an artist's DNA to create and inspire others, whether they are a fine artist, a pop artist, or a street artist. Street art has long created art that has inspired, motivated, and provoked critical thought among society. So much effort, time, and creativity go into creating street art pieces. Street artists should truly be recognized for their artwork, just as Warhol, Mark Rothko, Pablo Picasso, and Vincent van Gogh were recognized for theirs. If you are still a person, the average Mr. Joe or Mrs. Jane, who views street art as a crime, you are entitled to your opinions. But think about it. If more programs where children and individuals who love street art can freely express themselves were available, perhaps the association with street art and vandalism caused by gangs and the misbehavior of youth would change. Maybe if cities designated some of their abandoned buildings to develop street artists so they could have a place to display their art, or to the development of street art programs. The difference between street art that means something instead of crime done by gangs and misled youth would become more known. Personally, I will forever be a lover of street art and always believe it to be a true art form. But if you still believe that street art is criminal, I want to ask you this. If something can create a sense of peace, provoke a thought, create conversation, make a point, or create an environment where there is no judgment and only acceptance of all that you are, can you really consider that criminal? Thank you.